you are. Finally found you. Okay, we've got a lot to see and a lot to do, so let's go. Last April, I joined Tuskegee University's Fisheries and Wildlife program on an ecological trip to Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is a Caribbean island territory of the United States, but its history doesn't start there. From as early as 1000 CE, the Taino people called the island Borican. This name still lives on centuries later in the Puerto Rican ethnic term Boricuas. After the 1493 Spanish introduction to the New World and the devastating impacts on the indigenous people and African peoples brought here, Puerto Rico became a key player in the Spanish Empire's colonization of Central and South America. During the Spanish-American War, U.S. American troops would invade Puerto Rico in 1898. This U.S. control remains to this day, making PR a part of America. As with much of history, nothing is ever as streamlined as retellings can make it out to be, so I definitely encourage you to look further into Puerto Rican history if you're curious. For now, though, come along on this recap of the different parts of Puerto Rico my team and I explored. We have 7 days to cover, so let's start with arrival! We piled in a van and drove from the capital to Boquerón, a town in the western Cabo Rojo region. One of the things Boquerón is most proud of is their legend of a noble pirate. Roberto Confresi was a seafaring Robin Hood of sorts, known for being very kind and financially supportive to the brothel workers and residents of the town. Here's a statue of him in a mangrove cove. We hiked Fuerte Capron, a dry forest mountain with an old fort at the top. We saw aura vultures, banana keats, yellow-crowned night herons, and grackles. Grackles were everywhere, watching everything, cawing at us, sneaking up behind us, staring at us with their weird white ringed eyes. Grackles. And now, a folk art, Venestella. Ah! Isn't this cool? This is a Vejigante mask, a special mask worn during festivals. Hold on. The Boquerón artist, Emil Duros, made this out of coconut, but they can be made out of other materials too. Vejigante performers dress in vibrant fabrics and striking masks. They traditionally carry around a colorful inflated cow bladder with which to make mischief throughout the celebration. In fact, Vejigante literally translates to giant bladder. According to a Loiza artist you'll see later, Samuel Lim, Vejigantes as protective spirits are just one of many performers in traditional festivals. They're joined by Las Rasqueras, La Loca, and El Viejo. This festival tradition originally came from the Spanish Middle Ages. However, the largely formerly enslaved African diaspora and indigenous Taino traditions built upon this practice their own tastes, creating the unique version of the Vejigante that you can only find in Puerto Rico. Now back to... We woke up early to drive to the Cabo Rojo Salt Marsh Reserve to go birding with binoculars. It's actually a lot harder to fly with them than you think. One of the chaperones had us specifically looking for shorebirds. And wowzers, did we see a lot! We saw black-necked stilts, great egrets, sandpipers, night-of-scent frigatebird, and more arboreal birds like the Venezuelan tulipbill, Puerto Rican mango hummingbirds, raider and lesser yellow legs, and monk parakeets. But that wasn't the end of the day's adventure by a long shot. In the evening, we snorkeled in a bioluminescent bay. Or, well, the humans snorkeled. I love water, but it's hard to hide my tail when swimming, so I stayed on the boat until it was dark enough to see the bioluminescent algae. Turns out it is incredibly hard to record the underwater firefly-like light in new moon dark with a simple smartphone camera. So here are some high-def algae photos while I give a rundown of how they work. As much as it pains me to say, bioluminescent dinoflagellates aren't related to dinosaurs. They are actually tiny algae. We met Pyrodinum bahamense, a species native to the Bahamas and Caribbean with an iconic blue-green glow. And what a glow it is! Everyone who swam looked like they were trailing stardust. See, whenever you move, the underwater algae will react to change in oxygen with a luciferase chemical reaction that produces light. Individual organisms can only flash once before needing hours to recharge, so every single glittering light was a different creature. We only stayed out for 30 minutes to make sure this special bay could be preserved for as long as possible. It was a bit of a late night by the time we returned to home base, but it was definitely worth it. We had another early rise to make the 3-hour drive back to the eastern side of the island. This is the wet side, where you're more likely to hear the coquille frogs. We drove all the way over here to visit the El Yunque National Rainforest and El Puerto de El Yunque Rainforest Center. El Puerto Rainforest Center was a great introduction to the rainforest and conservation efforts of the people that work here. This is the U.S.'s only national tropical rainforest. The U.S. has a few national temperate rainforests in the Smokies and the Pacific Northwest, but this rainforest is in a league of its own. Lots of tropical species can be found here, like the mountain mullet, rainbow lictus tree, Puerto Rican parrot, and iguana. It definitely felt like a tropical rainforest. Even if it didn't rain as much as we expected that day, it sure was humid. At least the hike on the Angelito Trail was shaded pretty well. The canopy had huge trees with wide leaves, and splashing in the Rio Mameyes was a great reward at the end of the hike. So relaxing. And now, a boca Venezuela. El Puerto de El Yunque Rainforest Center had a gift shop and local art vendor space. My group mates got lots of handmade jewelry and original books from both spaces. But I was especially interested in these petroglyph magnets. As mentioned before, the Taino lived here and throughout the Caribbean long before European colonization. They referred to El Yunque Mountain as the home of one of their deities, Yucahu. Yucahu was said to live in the white lands of the Luquillo Mountain's foggy peak, hence the original Taino name of Yucay. Unfortunately, due to Spanish colonization, the Taino language was nearly stamped out. But there is good news. The language is currently undergoing revitalization thanks to some very dedicated Taino researchers and allies. And thankfully, the original petroglyphs still live on within archaeological site. In several preserved spots all over the mountain, Taino artists had carved petroglyphs. Petroglyphs are rock art carving, not to be confused with pictographs, which are rock art paintings. These particular Taino petroglyphs are hundreds of years old. These petroglyph symbols also occur in cultural ceramic designs, with each symbol representing both an element of the natural world and a deep spiritual connection. I like these magnets because they show the petroglyph and the English translation underneath. See, this is sun, baby, turtle, and water. The coquille frog is my favorite. I liked it so much, I even got this ornament. Its eyes are big like mine. Funnily enough, frogs and turtles were the two Puerto Rican animals we didn't see on our trip. But that's okay. We still saw other neat stuff that makes PR PR. Now back to... Another early rise, but at least this was the final stretch. We drove down to the southern side of the island to visit Hobos Bay. The Hobos Bay National Estuarine Research Reserve is part Oceanic Natural History Museum with a real whale skeleton, part Coastal Research Center, and part mangrove nursery, which meant we got to see a lot of the unique elements of our estuarine ecosystem. The brackish water, fiddler crabs, brown pelican, and of course the mangroves. Black and white mangrove saplings are being raised here or being planted in restoration projects all around the bay. Hurricanes Irma and Maria really damaged a lot of Puerto Rico from the sea to the mountains. People and nature are still recovering from these storms so many years later, so it's a good thing people like these steadfast estuarine researchers are innovating on ways to help their local ecosystems and communities build back. Communication from the head honcho decreed today was a rest day, so that's what we did. Rested, saw ghost crabs, a little mangrove hike, and a final dinner. Our flight back to the mainland was this afternoon, so we spent the morning in Loiza, a town 30 minutes from the airport. Do you remember one of the artists I mentioned in the first and now segment, Samuel Lin? Well, we got to visit his art studio. He showed us the town's cultural Taino and African roots through his art. His whole studio was alive. His painted snapshots of his town and culture were so colorful, eye-opening, and inviting. Next, we stopped at the Loiza beach to listen to Bomba y Plena musicians play. Bomba y Plena is a Puerto Rican folk music genre that you've been listening to in the background of this video all along. It was great listening to the drummers and watching the dancers. And the beach was very pretty. And before we knew it, it was time to zip back to the mainland. Okay, I need to close this quickly before I crash. Huge thanks to the Tuskegee Forestry and Wildlife team for planning this trip. It was so expansive, covering what felt like every cardinal corner of the island. Thank you to the 11 students and especially the 6 chaperones in the group. Dr. Fareed, Dr. Perkins, Dr. Dames, Miss Wiseman, Dr. Smith, and Mr. Jackson. You all were genuinely curious and silly people. I'm grateful to have spent that week with you. I appreciate all the work you put into making this as great a trip as possible. And thank you to all the amazing people who shared slices of their life and home with us. And thank you, viewers, so much for watching.